about the good material, but it's also dependent on convenience. 34% of the people says the accessibility of the box is one of my main barriers. And 42 of my participants knew one spot that is convenient to reach. 42% say one spot is convenient to reach, which means nearly 60% of all the people answering my research said the boxes are not convenient to reach. And this is kind of, ugly if you imagine how many of those horrible boxes are standing around everywhere with the dumping of some sofas and some other furnitures. But in the end, when we really need a box, they're kind of gone. I don't want to talk really about those practices, how those companies and charities are putting up those boxes, but there's a lot of illegal dumping as well from the boxes. And there's a war about those boxes. Some of the collectors fight for the boxes and for the content specifically, not for the metal value, but for the content. Yeah, I just want to say, actually, the textiles have a higher value than most of the materials which we collect in the blue box. But nobody really knows. The picture here shows a research from the University of Toronto, and I really like it very much. It's kind of a drop box locator, and I think this is hopefully the future, that every city has a little app which says, where can I find my next drop box? But before we have such tools, we might have to do a bit more work. So, how are consumers actually managing textile waste? 49% throw their clothes away because they think they're in such a bad condition that nobody could wear them anymore. And 9% actually have admitted that they dispose everything. They never even thought about something else doing with their clothes than throwing them into the waste bin. And we can estimate that Ontario alone produces more than 500,000 tons of residential textile waste. This picture, or this photo here, is taken by William Blair. He sent it to me, I think 1.5 years ago, and he found it in a residential waste stream here in Waterloo, and he's just sent one sentence coming with this picture, and he said, "There's plenty more, Sabine." We talk a lot about a circular economy, and this picture, I made this last year for my master's, shows you a bit about the material flow of a garment production. You can see that we use about 50% of organic fibers and about 50% of synthetic fibers. Those materials usually get spun, then we make the fabric. The fabric is usually cut, made, and trimmed. This all is usually done somewhere in China or around in the globe. The garment comes to us consumer, we use them, and here it is. 85% of all those textiles end up in the landfill. 85% of all those textiles end up in the waste stream. Only 15% are collected by our charities, some private organization, including the mafia. You can see there are not many lines back to the first stage, which means actually we don't really have a circular economy in terms of textiles. So let's have a look about those 15% which are getting collected. 6.75% from those 15% are actually mainly reused as second-hand clothes. I have a picture here of a Goodwill store in Toronto. This is not existing anymore because, unfortunately, Goodwill Toronto had to close down. People from the Waterloo region are in a better position. Goodwill is still their partner, and Goodwill in the Great Lakes is doing really well. But it's a franchise company, and each of them is doing a really different job. If we look at this picture on the right side, this is a man in Uganda. The photo was taken by one of my friends. And the majority of those 6.72%, more than 4%, in fact, are sold worldwide. The main continent is Africa. Some of those clothing also go to Indonesia, very, very bit, but more to Pakistan, a bit to India, to Bangladesh, to South America. We also ship to Costa Rica, more or less worldwide. 4.5% are reclaimed and converted. This means those material gets somehow recycled, and then we can use it as stuffing material and upholstery. There are some great companies, they're using it in their cars as insulation material. On my picture, you can see a counter desk, which was made out of denim fibers. It's a company in the US. And then you can see that 3% are reclaimed into new fibers. There are some great companies, for example, in Montreal, there is Victor Innovators, and they are recycling polyester into new polyester, into recycled polyester. And then from those 15%, about 0.75 are actually sorted out and definitely end up again in the landfill. So what can we do to fight against this huge amount of textile waste? Well, it's very simple. It always comes down to the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. In my research, I found out that fashion consumers are actually managing textile waste different than non-fashion consumers, and that they're really interested in doing something with their clothes because they know there is value. For all the others, they have less interest. So actually, fashion people would be interested in swapping, take back, reselling, or whatever they can do with their clothes to get some money out of them. This is a picture 2 days ago in Toronto. There was this big Value Village Rethink, Reuse, Reduce summit, where we tried to foster a society where we use our material in our country. Because, and this is the funny part, a lot of people buy new clothes because they are bored of their old ones, and they can have more or less the same effect if they buy them secondhand. Here's a big exporting challenge. More than 30 countries in Africa have already embargoes against used clothing. Now, Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania are also thinking about this. So one day we might not be able to ship everything to Africa. Textiles can be recycled. This is the good news, but unfortunately we don't have a recycling industry. And we desperately really need more and more research on this topic. What we have in Canada, what we have in Ontario is a recycling industry which is mechanical. We have racking and we have a little bit of shredding. We have more or less no chemical recycling, which is the idea that we solve the material and that we can spun polyester back, or that we can use the cellulosic material, for example, for packaging. And I think this is the point where I would like to call, if anybody is interested in recycling or building up relationships to the textile industry, I'm more than happy to foster this whole dialogue and this communication. And one last question to each of you. What would you do with a single shoe? Hands up. I give you 2 options. The first option, you have a single shoe because the other one unfortunately got broken. You throw both pairs into the waste stream. Or, hands up, who would do that? If you have a broken shoe and then there's another one left, what would you do with those shoes? Would you put them in the waste box? Hands up. Yeah, here it is, guys. That is the problem. There is a great category for single shoes. And they would be more than happy to get this single shoe from you. There's a place in Pakistan where they actually collect single shoes and they try to pair them, and they're really successful in doing this. So the problem is really, we as a consumers, we don't know what to do and what to donate. And here we need education and training. Thank you so much.